A ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon's Hezbollah has taken effect as part of a deal proposed by the U.S. to end more than a year of hostilities. The conflict, ignited by the Gaza war last year, has wreaked havoc on both sides. Let's take a closer look at the costs of the conflict so far. At least 3,768 people have been killed in Lebanon and 15,699 wounded since October 2023, according to Lebanon's health ministry. Those figures do not differentiate between Hezbollah fighters and civilians. The vast majority of casualties were inflicted after Israel went on the offensive in September. Hezbollah strikes have killed 45 civilians in northern Israel and the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. Israeli authorities said at least 73 Israeli soldiers have been killed in northern Israel, the Golan Heights, and in combat in southern Lebanon. Over 886,000 people have been displaced within Lebanon, according to the International Organization for Migration and the UN Refugee Agency. UNHCR data shows that over 540,000 people have fled Lebanon to Syria since the war started. In Israel, some 60,000 people evacuated their homes in the north. Houses and buildings in both Lebanon and Israel have been destroyed. In Lebanon, the cost of damage to housing is estimated at $2.8 billion, with tens of thousands of houses in ruins. A World Bank report also estimated agricultural losses of more than $1.1 billion as crops and livestock have been destroyed and farmers displaced. In Israel, authorities estimate property damage to be at least $273 million. The bulk of the damage in Israel has been inflicted in areas adjacent to the Lebanese border, pummeled by Hezbollah rockets. A preliminary World Bank estimate has put the damage and losses in Lebanon at $8.5 billion. Lebanon's GDP is also projected to contract by 5.7% in 2024. Tourism and hospitality, which are key contributors to Lebanon's economy, have been hit hardest. For Israel, the conflict with the Iran-backed group has compounded the economic impact of the war in Gaza. The budget deficit has surged and prompted all three major credit rating agencies to downgrade Israel's rating this year. The conflict has also exacerbated supply chain disruptions and driven up inflation.
U.S. President Joe Biden's administration is preparing a $725 million weapons package for Ukraine. That's according to U.S. officials on Wednesday. It's an effort by the outgoing president to bolster the government in Kyiv before Donald Trump takes the White House in January. Quickly winding down the war was one of Donald Trump's central promises on the campaign trail, though he's avoided discussing details. The package is said to include cluster munitions as well as a variety of anti-tank weapons, including landmines, which the United States has not exported in decades, and are controversial because of the potential harm to civilians. Over 160 countries have signed a treaty banning their use, but Kyiv has been asking for them since Russia launched its invasion in 2022. The reported $725 million price tag marks a steep uptick in size from Biden's recent use of so-called presidential drawdown authority, which allows the U.S. to draw from current weapons stocks to help allies in an emergency. Recent PDA announcements have typically ranged from $125 to $250 million. The size and contents of the package could still change, but one official said that the formal notification to Congress could come as soon as Monday. Russian forces are currently making gains in Ukraine at the fastest rate since the early days of the invasion. Analysts and war bloggers said this week that they have taken an area half the size of London over the past month.
This is the first application.
The International Criminal Court's prosecutor, Imran Khan, said Wednesday he would seek an arrest warrant for Myanmar's military leader for crimes against humanity and the alleged persecution of the country's Rohingya minority.
My office has concluded that there are reasonable grounds to believe that Senior General and Acting President Min Aung, Commander-in-Chief of the Myanmar Defence Services, bears criminal responsibility for the crimes against humanity of deportation and persecution of the Rohingya committed in Myanmar and in part of Bangladesh between the 25th of August 2017 and the 31st of December 2017.
A spokesperson for Myanmar's ruling junta did not answer calls from Reuters immediately after the announcement. Reuters has requested comments from the military government by email. 1 million Rohingya fled to escape a Myanmar military offensive launched in August 2017. It's a military campaign UN investigators described as a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. Soldiers, police and Buddhist villagers are alleged by UN investigators to have razed hundreds of villages in the remote western Rakhine state, torturing residents, carrying out mass killings and gang rapes. Myanmar has denied the allegations and says security forces were carrying out legitimate operations against militants who attacked police posts. More than 1 million Rohingya refugees now live in squalor in camps in Bangladesh. Rohingya activist Shahat Zia says the ICC should act on the arrest warrant immediately.
We demand justice. If justice gets served, only then can we go home. It has been 8 years that we are suffering as refugees in here.
In a statement, the prosecutor's office said that more applications for arrest warrants relating to Myanmar will follow. A panel of judges will now decide if there are, quote, reasonable grounds to believe General Min Aung Hlaing bears criminal responsibility for the deportation and persecution of Rohingya in Myanmar and Bangladesh.
Protests in Pakistan's capital calling for the release of jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan have been called off, his party has said. That's after a midnight raid by security forces saw hundreds of Khan's supporters arrested, according to local media. Islamabad residents woke up on Wednesday to empty streets, littered with smashed-up vehicles. A spokesman for Khan's PTI party confirmed a planned sit-in and street protests had been called off, citing what he called the massacre. The protests have resulted in the deaths of at least 6 people, among them 4 paramilitary soldiers and 2 protesters. Interior Minister Mohsin Naqvi said Pakistan's law enforcement had cleared protesters from the spot targeted for the sit-in, the city's highly fortified red zone and other areas of the capital. Thousands of protesters descended on Islamabad centre the previous day. A convoy led by Khan's wife, Bushra Bibi, broke through several lines of security to reach the edge of the red zone. The remains of a truck used by Bibi appeared charred by flames, witnesses said. The PTI party's president for the city of Peshawar said the protest was called off and they would chalk out the new strategy. He said Khan's wife had returned safely to the province from the capital.
The fate of Chinese Defense Minister Dong Jun remains unclear. On Wednesday, 2 U.S. officials said he was being investigated for corruption, while another said the news should be treated with caution. Media reports say Dong is under investigation in a major anti-corruption effort in the People's Liberation Army. One U.S. official, speaking anonymously, said China's investigation into its rocket forces had spread to the military and procurement more generally. The official added that the investigation into Dong is important because Chinese President Xi Jinping appointed him. Dong would be the 3rd consecutive Chinese defense minister to be investigated for alleged corruption. When asked, a Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson called the reports of a probe chasing shadows. China's military has conducted an anti-corruption purge since last year, removing at least 9 generals and several defense industry leaders. Dong, a former PLA Navy chief, was appointed defense minister in December 2023 and handles China's military relations with other countries. He oversaw a recent improvement in US-China military ties, with both nations holding their first commander-level talks in September. But he since appears to have been passed over for promotion to the Central Military Commission, the country's top military body. His 2 predecessors were expelled from the Communist Party in June for serious violations of discipline, a term that Beijing often uses as a euphemism for corruption.
Voters waited in long lines outside polling stations in Namibia's capital, Windhoek, on Wednesday morning. It's an election that could mark a historic shift in the country's political landscape if the ruling SWAPO party loses the presidency or control of parliament for the first time. SWAPO has governed the southern African nation since leading it to independence from apartheid South Africa in 1990. Its presidential candidate is Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah, the current vice president.
Voting is not just your constitutional responsibility, but it is also your national responsibility.
Nandi-Ndaitwah would be the country's first female leader if she wins. She faces 14 opposition candidates in Namibia's most competitive election in decades. Presidential candidates need more than 50% of the ballot to win, or there will be a runoff. SWAPO saw support fall to 56% in the 2019 presidential election from 87% in 2014. Political analysts say there's a chance SWAPO could be ousted by young people fed up with high unemployment, inequality and corruption allegations. Although long-standing loyalty to the party among older and rural voters could help pull it through. Namibia has seen relatively strong economic growth in recent years, driven by investments in oil, gas and green hydrogen. But it ranks second highest in the world for income inequality, according to World Bank figures. About 1.4 million people are registered to vote in the sparsely populated country of around 3 million, according to the Electoral Commission. Results are expected within a few days.
Residents in Tinzawa 10 face other threats than the violence that has raged nearby. The town in Mali's north is now being hit with drone strikes and outbreaks of disease. In July, Tuareg rebels who control Tinzawa 10 inflicted heavy losses on Russian mercenaries nearby. But since then, multiple drone strikes have killed dozens of civilians, including children, doctors and residents in the border town near Algeria. Security-related roadblocks have also hampered access to supplies, such as bed nets and medicines needed to combat outbreaks. Musa Bagayoko, a doctor based in Tinzawa 10, said the town was suffering an epidemic of diphtheria, a severe bacterial infection, as well as an uptick in malaria cases.
Our current context is associated with a diphtheria epidemic in the Tinzawa 10 region. Malaria is a particular feature of this year's situation, with many patients presenting with severe anemia and a large number being admitted in a state of altered consciousness, raising suspicions of cerebral malaria.
The dire conditions have been made worse by severe flooding following heavy rain across the Sahel region. And that's against the backdrop of ongoing insecurity, as Mali's army and Russian mercenaries battle separatist groups and powerful offshoots of Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. According to one village chief, tens of thousands of displaced people have been passing through Tinzawa 10. Now, amid disease and drone strikes, many of the town's residents are joining the exodus as they flee north to Algeria.